Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, whatever part of the world you're currently listening to our video blog and podcasts. Um, I've decided to go out for a quick walk and exercise a little bit. So I thought I have y'all join me on my walk as I enjoy the weather. It's not as warm and humid as it's been the last couple weeks. I heard there's a hurricane actually heading up its way, so I guess that's kind of giving us some sort of heat relief. So I've decided to go out for a walk. Anyway, thanks for joining me. It's past mid-year already. It's already August, late August actually, and so just a few more months and it'll be December again, and winter will be upon us. So with that said, folks, I thought I reflect on the last couple of 8 months. Things have changed quite a bit. The situation in Eastern Europe and various markets throughout the world are starting to bound and improve. I haven't done a lot of research yet regarding how much of improvements been happening in the markets outside of Europe, but there's been some, very positive and favorable market response to what's going on pertaining to the stability in the European markets due to the war in Ukraine. And I haven't seen a whole lot of changes up until recently, the markets, global markets, mainly because now after Mr. Trump's and Putin's meeting, it seems as if the markets are starting to calm down and starting to get somewhat productive again. It's been stagnant for many years, actually, since the beginning of the war. But I have seen quite a bit of positive movements and influx towards, a profitable rest of the year, for markets. And unfortunately, that it isn't as profound within the European markets, which is kind of funny. Europe by far is one of the wealthiest continents in the world. Yeah. Every time there's some sort of an issue in that region of the world, it's been the last rebound for some reason. Other markets, Asia, Middle East, this other than their typical commodities. But if you were to look at Europe as a marketplace, it's always, the last one to rebound from any economic, issue or problematic situations. So, which is we find interesting. But having said that, there are some positive, indicators that the rest of the year is going to be more of a bullish year for the rest of the world, and maybe you'll see that also in Europe. If this war ever stops, if it ever comes to a peace agreement, which I believe it will eventually, because just last Monday, Mr. Zelensky and his many supporters within the European Union, mostly Western countries, that were benefiting mostly from the war, because of their politicians are getting a lot of, publicity. And so they would like that, especially if you're a politician. You're getting, free publicity through the war conflict by saying that you support Ukraine, which most of them, I don't know if they truly believe in what's going on in Ukraine. But anyway, Zelensky was at the White House, and they seem to have had a good meeting. The Prime Minister of Britain, President Macron of France was there, Prime Minister of Germany, the Italian, Prime Minister was also there, and the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, and Ms. van der Leyen of the European Union was also present. So big wigs of Europe was present. So that just tells you, folks, that these people have a vested interest in this war. Now, to what extent are they willing to sacrifice the region and the markets? I don't know. But their interest is definitely not in the best interest of the public or the markets of Europe. Because if it was, then they would have advocated for, the de-escalation of the war. They would have found a way to convince Zelensky to diplomatically and amicably fix this issue with Russia. But, they didn't do that. They basically egg him on and try to convince him that it's in his best interest and his people's best interest to keep on fighting, which isn't really the best, situation to be in. But yeah, folks, that's how things are. So I'm seeing new people here. Jeff, I can't really read your name right now because the text is so small, but thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. And I appreciate your messages there. So if you've seen me walking down the street, would you call eyes on me? Be honest. I don't know. I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what your, overall status in the country. Why would I do that? I'm not one of those people that just call the authorities over, suspicion that somebody might be in the country legally or illegally. I'm not going to do that. Why would I even contemplate that? It doesn't make sense. You can't tell who's legally or illegally in the country anyway. Yes, there are those people that aren't the typical American looking people, and therefore people obviously automatically think that they're in the country illegally, which is far from the truth. Angel Club, hello. Friga, Vargas, Duran, hello. You're asking me what? Well, I hope you understand what I'm telling you guys. But anyway, just to answer the question, I don't just call authorities, for no good reason at all. No, the problem today, folks, is that there's this stereotype where, in the media, people kind of single out certain people. Like if you see a Hispanic looking person, an Asian looking person, or somebody from the Caribbean who's African, people assume that they're all illegals. They're not. Majority of them are not illegals. But unfortunately, there's this pre-existing stereotype in the country that if you're not white, or if you don't kind of resemble a typical American, which I don't even know what a typical American is, then you must be in the country illegally. That's not true, folks. Don't be one of those stuck on stupid type of people. But yeah, anyway, I appreciate the question. So you still want me to talk about this? Okay. And so you wanted to know my location. Well, I'm pretty much all over the place. So, but anyway, I hope I've answered the question. And thanks for the question. I know that some of you are very interested in my opinion regarding this issue, because many of you know that I come from an immigrant family. My parents immigrated to the U.S. legally. They waited close to a decade actually, before they were allowed to enter the country. So, yeah, I mean, if you're willing to wait and sacrifice your future that way, then I guess you've earned the right to be in the country. But I'm still, divided somewhat, but I understand why it's important that we remove people that came to the country illegally, because we don't know who they are, we don't know what their motivations are, and so that's why a lot of what's going on today is really, politicized. It's not an issue of, strategic, country development or market development. People politicize everything, and unfortunately, those that are opposing this current administration have, turned the table around and made it look like it's a bad thing to enforce our immigration laws. No, it's not. It's actually in the best interest of the country, the size of America. We need legal immigrants coming into the country because it's so big, and we need to make sure that we're safe. Anyway, folks, I'm going to move on because I wasn't really thinking about talking about legal and illegal immigration, but I know some of you are interested in my opinion regarding it. I know some of you, I have a feeling actually that there are people that are trolling me online and that are even tapping into my phone and internet signal. So I know I have that feeling that that's going on. It's been going on for quite some time now, since I see these really strange, nefarious activities on my emails and on my social media platform. I guess the more that you become well known and public, people, take the opportunity to attack you. Many of them have been attacking me online, and some of them are actually, I'm guessing, are connected to some rogue government system. So anyway, as I was saying, Zelensky and his comrades that are part of the European Union that didn't want to de-escalate this war conflict showed up in Washington, D.C. last Monday because according to the news, which is mostly liberal news in the U.S., they showed up so that the Trump administration wouldn't bully him. Now, I don't know who would think that way, bullying another head of state when that head of state, quote unquote head of state, I should say, because technically his term ended last May of last year. So basically, it wasn't that they were trying to bully him. They were trying to talk some sense into him because, mostly or most of the time, they have just had enough of this war. I'm talking about the administration, the current Trump administration. So they just wanted to escalate the problem, bring the region back to normalcy, and save lives and try to rebuild. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care what your politics is. I don't know who would want for other people to suffer the way that many of these people have already suffered in Ukraine, and even in Russia. So, yeah, folks, it's just the overall agenda, I believe, of this administration is to just bring the region back to normalcy and save as many lives as possible, and help those that need help. I mean, technically, the U.S. isn't even supposed to be participating in this issue. We have no horse in this race, for example. I mean, the Russians and the Ukrainians have always been fighting throughout the years, but they also basically invest in each other, and they share people within their government system. They swap government officials quite a bit, and so they have Ukrainians operating in the Russian government and Russians operating in the Ukrainian government. So I don't even know why this issue is still an ongoing conflict, because in all reality, folks, there's really no reason why there's even a war going on right now. Could have been easily fixed back in 2021. So people think that the war started in 2022. No, it started back in 2021 in the summer, that it built up into an escalation into February 2022. So initially there was some conflict that was happening in the territories that sided with the Russian in the 2014 referendum after the Maidan Revolution. So many of them had an opportunity to vote and side with whoever it is that they want to be with in terms of territory. So the people that were closer to Russia wanted to be Russians, and they wanted to basically become a territory, especially in Crimea and Donbass, because there's a lot of Tatar people there, and they're ethnic Russians basically. So they wanted to side with the Russians, and they did. Okay, and up until the middle of the year 2021, when the Zelensky people decided that they wanted to regain access to those former territories, and they basically were disrupting life for many people in those territories. And given that, the Zelensky government basically campaigned on reuniting and recapturing those territories, that was his campaign promise. He was going to bring back those territories that sided with the Russians, because to them, they claim that it's an illegal election. It was an illegal referendum. And to me, well, if it was illegal, why didn't they just call another referendum? Okay, instead of attacking them and going to war with the Russians. So anyway, going back to what I was saying, the Trump administration, and mostly Americans, and I would imagine regular Europeans will be sick and tired of what's going on in Europe right now with this war, because it's really disrupting a lot of people. The Ukrainians and the people within the countries where the Ukrainians are having to move to and try to, take shelter. So anyway, the Trump administration definitely don't have a horse in this race, and I'm glad that they're somewhat trying to, emphasize that our commitment is towards peace and not to take sides, because it's important for us to tell people and have people understand that the two countries, Russia and Ukraine, could have easily fixed the situation. So anyway, but that's pretty much where everything is at this point, folks. What else is going on? There's quite a bit of stuff that happened, and it kind of, escalated uncontrollably that led to the war. But it could have been easily prevented back in 2021 when the Russians basically instructed Zelensky to stop attacking those territories, which they didn't. So in 2022, the Russians that was already positioned in Ukraine, they were already in the territories that sided with the Russians, got mobilized, and they ended up marching into Kiev, which they didn't really stay too long in Kiev. I mean, it was just, I think, a few weeks, and then they pulled back out after they decided to sign an agreement, a peace treaty in Istanbul, Turkey, which was basically derailed by Boris Johnson and everybody else that supported Zelensky and told him not to give up and not to, surrender, quote unquote surrender, which isn't really surrendering because he wasn't fighting in the whole country. It's only a part of these territories that the Russians wanted to regain back. But anyway, so that's pretty much the whole, gist of this whole issue. So anyway, what else is going on? Yeah, so we're trying to just pay attention to the de-escalation process. Now, the escalation process will be coming in waves. I know they were talking about in Alaska, and even last Monday, that they would like to, stop the war altogether, and there's not going to be any ceasefire or, postponement of attacks. I don't know if either side, especially their military on the ground, would comply. I know, the decision makers, these politicians, the people that makes the policy would like for that to happen. But I think there's just way too much anger, animosity, hatred, and killing that took place. And it's kind of spiraled down out of control. And it's going to be hard to, just abruptly stop the war altogether. Okay, folks. I think it's going to be stages when people would disarm and return back home or wherever it is that they come from. So anyway, I just hope that this happens relatively soon, within this year, because I have seen some improvements in the markets, especially in the financial sector in Asia and even in the US and parts of Europe. I don't know if that's going to be the whole European continent that will be able to rebound as quickly, but at least there's some progress. With that said, folks, thank you for walking with me and listening to my video blog. And I don't know if I'm going to upload this to my podcast yet, because it's going to be a lengthy podcast, but I appreciate everyone, even the ones that are trying to hate on me. I see some of you guys there that are dogging me out. I have no idea who you are, and I know there's some haters out there. I know there's some people that want to do harm to me. That's, I guess the reality of being an influencer and somebody that puts yourself out there to make this world a better place. So yeah, that's okay. There's people that want to definitely attack me. That's okay. I guess it takes guts to do what we do. You can't just go up to strangers and tell people that you hate them and wish harm for them. And there's some people out there on the internet world or social media world that are hating on people that are trying to make this world a better place. But it's all good. Anyway, I'm gonna keep on doing what I do, so go fuck yourself. And I'm gonna try to help as many people as I can. Anyway, so moving on, let's see what else is happening. So let's kind of think how this 8 months kind of manifested itself, okay, throughout the year. I mean, the year's almost over, so we got a couple more months to go, and it'll be in year 2026, and it's going to be another election year next year. So what else happened this 8 months? So one of the biggest things was basically the US and Russia meeting in Alaska that took place last Friday. That was definitely something worth writing about in history. For the longest times, and I'm gonna kind of diversify this video blog into US-Russia relations. Okay, folks. Okay, so looking back, way back, when the Russians were in power, when they sold Alaska to the US, and the US was still in good terms with, the Russians, there really wasn't a whole lot of strain in the relationship. I mean, they fought the Nazis during World War II together. So without the Russians, we wouldn't have been able to defeat the Nazis, okay? Because the Russians were already fighting the Nazis before we even got involved. And they were actually, the Russians were protecting U.S. military in many fronts of the battle, especially closer to the Polish region. So for the longest time, you know, this boogeyman, which was the Russians, that were created by U.S. foreign policy. The reason for that is because, you know, for some weird reason, the U.S. was looking for somebody to blame, and just like what we were doing with the Chinese and everybody else. Okay, so it escalated basically, and it just carried on until no one really knows and have a good reason why it's still carried on and it's still being utilized within the diplomatic narratives of the U.S. And so last Friday's meeting basically was even better than the time when Hillary Clinton was the State Department Secretary. Okay, because she actually tried to reset, she claims she tried to reset relations, okay, between Russia and the U.S. But really, you know, she didn't even spell the word reset correctly, and she gave the button to Mr. Lavrov, the Russian Secretary of State, and she didn't even know what she was doing. All right, that just shows you, folks, how far removed we've gone when it comes to diplomacy. Okay, when Clinton, who was a former senator and former candidate for president, doesn't even know the overall issue while we're, you know, in conflict with the Russians. You know, she basically just embarrassed her, not only herself, her office, and the whole country, but the overall history between the U.S. and Russia relationship that was back then, you know, before or after World War II was in pristine condition. We had good relations with the Russians until things started to escalate because people basically started dogging the Russians out, and no one tried to fix, you know, the narrative. So Mr. Trump finally fixed that narrative. Maybe it's based off of, you know, the suggestion of the Secretary of State Mark Rubio, or people that have been subject matter experts on these kinds of issues. But, you know, but I think he did a really good job in resetting relations with the Russians, and hopefully trust and real diplomacy will happen again, so that we can start trading with the Russians and they with us, and we can buy products and services from them, and they can buy products and services with us. So I think that's going to be a major victory in terms of affairs. I mean, if you really look at geography, folks, the U.S. is right next door neighbor to the Russians. If you were to go up to Alaska, okay, it's just a couple miles away between Alaskan territory, I mean the Russian territory, and the U.S. territory that has been separated by the Bering Strait. So if we were to join force with the Russians, okay, and the Russians help us connect with Asia, then this world will be so much better off in terms of conflict, that we won't be dealing with any more issues in terms of animosities and conflicts. Because once we stabilize our relationship with the Russians, hopefully that will also help us stabilize our relationship with every other countries in Asia. Not just Russia and China, but every other countries in Asia, that would show some sort of trust, okay, in our overall motivation to work together and create a peaceful world. You know, not just, you know, temporarily, but long term. All right, folks. So yeah, anyway, what I was saying was that, yeah, let's try to build up on what the Trump administration had tried to accomplish last Friday. You know, he needs the support of the country, you know, regardless of your party. It's in the best interest of America, regardless of party, to normalize our relationship with the Russians. Okay, folks. Anyway, yeah, don't just take my word for it. Do your research. Look at, you know, emerging and frontier markets around the world that are growing pretty fast, you know, in terms of their economic development and their ability to increase their potential. Okay, one good example is the war. Actually, if you look at what took place during the war, the whole world, especially the Western world, thought that Russia being isolated will collapse because of all the, you know, sanctions that was put against them by Western Europe and the US. But instead, their economy actually grew and flourished because they became self-sufficient one way or the other. But you know, it's not just being isolated. They were trading with other Asian countries, but overall, the thought that the Russians will just, you know, turn over and go belly up didn't happen. That just shows you that many of the countries that we've tried to isolate are no longer in those brackets of, you know, axis of evil. They're definitely not in it anymore, because when the axis of evil narrative was created, it was a political narrative. It wasn't an economic narrative. And today, the Russians debunk both economic and political narrative. The Russians are just like any other countries today, like a Western country, and even Eastern country. I shouldn't just, you know, single out those Asian countries, because they've also improved their overall, you know, market condition and capacity. Oh, so it looks like there's a funeral for a service member, and they have a 21 gun salute. Imagine, that's pretty interesting. So they have a gun salute right across from me. It's a funeral parlor, and I guess these military people are honoring a service member who had passed, so they did the gun salute. Anyway, what I was saying is the world has changed big time. You know, when I was in school many years ago, there were like 160 countries that were recognized as sovereign countries, sovereign states by the United Nations. But today that increases significantly. Okay, folks. So there's more countries today and sovereign countries today than ever before. And so that just tells you, folks, that narratives that are outdated and very confusing and misleading is no longer relevant in today's world and today's market. All right. Okay, I'm a little sweaty, but I'm glad I'm taking this walk. It's really nice, you know, breezy and cool outside for a walk before it rained. So I'm glad I went out for a walk. But anyway, what I was saying, yeah, narrative of, you know, the axis of evil is no longer relevant in today's world. Every country's out there. Every country are building their capacity by the leaps and bounds. They're moving pretty fast, and it's not in, you know, the U.S. interest or anyone's interest to continue to isolate these major countries that are growing. So yeah, basically what I wanted to kind of talk about and endorse today. Obviously, there's quite a bit of stuff going on around the world. 6 wars was prevented or actually de-escalated by the current administration that the world doesn't even know about, you know, because they weren't covered in the news, in the Western news and U.S. news specifically. But there's been conflicts around the world that were basically de-escalated by the current administration. Look, I'm not trying to endorse just one party. I'm not here to promote a specific administration, but by far I have seen a lot of progress in the world and in the country via this administration. Okay, folks, that's just my independent assessment as an analyst, former federal government analyst, former U.S. Senate candidate, and as a professional. That's just my overall opinion, is that this administration have done a lot of house cleaning, and I hope they continue to improve the situation of the country and the world via their proactive approach to development and diplomacy as well as policy. Yeah. All right, folks. So some of you guys I don't know, there's people on our channel that are fans, and there are people that are not that, you know, fond of us, and most of the time the ones that are not so fond of us are the most vocal here, but that's okay. Anyhow, what I was gonna also add is the remaining 4 months to go. Okay, I'm gonna put this out there. I'm just gonna, you know, kind of jump the gun here and be that, you know, backseat driver in terms of U.S. foreign policy. Okay, what I believe will happen is the war will be de-escalated within this year, before the end of this year, and some sort of normalcy will return to the region. But I also feel that there's going to be remnants of the, you know, very evil, strange, and overall unproductive sectors throughout Ukraine that will continue to fight, and they're most likely going to try to just disrupt what's been, you know, build up on the progress that's been made. And those are the people that I'm worried about, because they tend to be, you know, sympathizers of the Bandera group and the Nazi group that is starting to move around Europe. Okay, and you know, that's something that I'm really worried about, because Europe as a continent used to be pretty powerful and wealthy, but now they're kind of, you know, hit the wall, and they're not growing as fast and as robust as they used to. Many of their pensioners are not getting the, you know, support that they were told they were going to get while they were working. Jobs are few and far in between in Europe today, and there's not a lot of investment entering the European market. And the more poverty and uneducated people a country or continent have, the more conflict they're going to have to deal with. The more, you know, animosity and anger towards the government will take place. Okay, folks, and that's what I'm worried about in terms of the future of Europe. because, you know, some of the politicians in Europe were only interested in their own, you know, individualistic gratification, lining their pockets, corruption, which is extremely prevalent now in Europe, that, you know, people in the continent will just be sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, imagine back in the days when all these Europeans immigrated to the US because of, you know, the monarchy and the oligarchy and all the corruption and all the evil and nefarious happening in Europe back in the day before the, you know, like the beginning of the great migration from Europe. I have a feeling that there's going to be some sort of great migration again that will be happening in this century out of Europe. But it's not, they're not going to be moving towards the west. They're going to be moving towards the east, especially when Russia and other countries in the east start to improve their markets to the point that it's similar to you know, a Western market environment. So that's what I'm guessing will happen, right, folks? And I've actually seen some, you know, some indicators of that going on now when the Germans are moving to Russia, for example. So that's the reality of today's world, folks. Markets will evolve, countries and societies will evolve, and I think in the next few years that's going to be the case. There's going to be quite a, you know, change that will happen in this world, that people from Europe will no longer be seen as Europeans. People from the Middle East will not be seen as Middle Easterns, Asians, you name it. They're gonna be like Americans, basically, where people from all over the world, you know, congregated in a country, and then they lost their connection to where they came from, and they became Americans. And that's gonna be a major market and global society shift that will be taking place when people no longer associate themselves with their national origin. And in many ways that could improve society, but it also could disrupt culture, tradition, you know, the norms of a society. So a country would have to be well versed and evolve enough to manage that kind of change and social dynamics in their countries, which is happening now relatively quickly. I mean, because of social media, because of the internet, because of artificial intelligence, smart city, you know, blockchain technology, the world's going to be influenced extremely rapidly and dramatically by, you know, technology. And technology will rearrange the demographics of the world. Many of that is happening today. And, you know, I'm in my 40s now, right? So I'm not so worried about it, because I know that people evolve and markets evolve, societies evolve. What I'm worried about is for those people that simply don't want to accept that the world is changing, and they will try to bring their country back to where it was. Now there's some good, you know, there's some good reason to bringing countries back to where it was, but there's also very bad reasons to bringing countries back to where it was. So you have to have a lot of wisdom, patience, and, you know, grit to maneuver a country to a point that, even if you were to bring it back to where it was, that you're also adaptable to the present condition in your country. So it's a balancing act that requires certain people, extremely special people, to do. You know, you can't be stuck on stupid. All right, folks. So, yeah, anyway, that's my spiel for today. I'm close to where I live now, and I appreciate your time and for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon. I hope you guys take the time to go out and enjoy the view and stretch your legs and get a little bit of exercise as well. All right, folks. Again, thanks for joining me. Till we meet again. Take care.